Hello, my name's Verity Firth and I'm the Executive Director of Social Justice at the University of Technology, Sydney. I also lead our Centre for Social Justice and Inclusion. Before I arrived at the university, I was the CEO of the Public Education Foundation, and before that, I was the Minister for Education and Training in New South Wales. Before I begin my remarks today, I'd like to do something that we always do in Australia, which is to pay respect to the First Nations people. I live in Glebe, which is a suburb in inner Sydney, and the people that I would like to pay respect to today are the traditional owners of the land, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. I want to pay respect to elders, past and present, and I also want to extend that respect to other Aboriginal people who may be listening today. COVID has been a big challenge for educators globally. The rapid shift to online learning has caught institutions and their teaching staff off guard, and never before have the inequalities around digital access been so stark, as some in our community are able to fully engage in learning and work, while others simply can't. COVID has particularly shone a light on the cleavages that exist in our education system in Australia, and it is to this topic that I address my remarks today. Even before COVID, the issues driving educational performance in Australia were complex. Our National Assessment Program, Literacy and Numeracy, or NAPLAN, is an annual assessment that the government runs for students in years 3, 5, 7 and 9. Every year the results show that there is a significant gap in performance based on socioeconomic status. Family socioeconomic status, or SES, strongly influences student performance. But what's interesting when we analyse these results is that school socioeconomic status also plays a significant role. NAPLAN data analysed by the New South Wales Department of Education shows that students from low SES families score 39 points more in Year 3 if they have high SES peers in their class, rather than if they have low SES peers. This effect has intensified by Year 9. In other words, what the data shows us is that mixed cohorts matter. Education outcomes are better for low SES kids in a school where there is a mix of SES profiles, where there is a diversity of cohort. Therefore, all of us, you would argue, should make sure that we attend our local public school and help create that mix. But in Australia, our system is becoming increasingly segregated. We have a very large non-government schooling sector compared to other jurisdictions. 34.4% of students in Australia go to a non-government school where their parents pay school fees. What this has meant is that there are schools with very high concentrations of advantage and schools with very high concentrations of disadvantage. This segregation is a big problem for Australia's overall education performance, as we have what is termed a long equity tail. The big concern about COVID is that we are, in essence, doubling down on these existing educational inequalities. COVID has brought into stark relief the digital divide that exists in Australia. While just 3% of high-income households don't have access to the internet, that rate increases to 33% among the lowest income households, presenting a major barrier and risk for children who are learning remotely. Unequal distribution of and access to digital devices is another growing issue that is only getting worse. At the Centre for Social Justice and Inclusion, part of our job is that we work with partner schools to create pathways to university for students from low SES backgrounds. At the beginning of COVID last year, we had to shift to online learning. This meant that instead of coming onto campus to do face-to-face workshops, all of our students were going to be shifted to online device-based learning. Now, in order to shift the students from face-to-face teaching, the university needed to provide 100 laptops to our partner schools. We had a total cohort that we were working with of 300 students. So there's your proof point. 1 in 3 students did not have a device, and we needed to provide it for them. But it's not just about hardware and devices. It's also about connectivity. Students either didn't have internet access at all at home, or if they did, they didn't have sufficient data plans to allow for online learning. As long as our schools stay closed, as they currently are in New South Wales, these cohort of students will be further disadvantaged. Now, I'm not arguing that schools should therefore just open up immediately. There are obviously very good public health reasons for this to be the case, but we do need to acknowledge the equity impact of shifting to online learning and closing our schools. So what do we do post-COVID? Well, a few years ago, I was in conversation with a Harvard-based educational ethicist called Mira Levinson. The conversation was hosted by the Sydney Policy Lab at Sydney University. We were talking about the segregation of the schooling system and how this impacted on student outcomes and perpetuated inequality. I asked her what could we do to change this dynamic, and she said, well, it's really difficult. Elite capture, she called it. No system can defeat it. Her view was that parents will always play the system to separate their children from others. In the US, they don't have a large non-government system, it's less than 10%, but they do have very strict schooling boundaries that effectively segregate the local population, often along class and race lines. Her view was that whatever the system, the elites will capture the best resources. They will have the best schools, and they will always find ways to separate themselves from populations with whom they don't feel they share a cultural affinity. Now, to me, this was a rather profoundly depressing view of human nature, and it's obviously, if this is the case, a big problem for social cohesion. But I would like to end my talk on a more upbeat take on the impact of COVID. COVID has made stark the existing inequalities in our society, but it has also created a sense of community and common purpose in a way that I have not witnessed in my lifetime. Everything from neighbourhood giving boxes to large-scale food donation to a Conservative government in Australia guaranteeing the wages of workers forced to stay home during lockdown. These are amazing events. A more community-driven and collectivist understanding has emerged from COVID, and now we need to bottle it and keep it. In Australia, a community-driven response to education inequalities would see more families attend and contribute to their local public school. And it would also see policymakers and educators turn their minds in real seriousness to the digital divide. Advanced technologies, including AI, have the potential to transform education for the better. AI can give educators quicker and more precise analysis of data to understand what it is their students need, can offer greater personalised learning and support, and enable more engaging ways to learn. Most of all, advanced technologies can liberate teachers from rote administrative tasks, giving them more time to do what they do best: teach. I'm hoping that when the world emerges from COVID, we will remember the lessons learnt, that inequality is magnified in a crisis, but so is a collective sense of social justice. Let's hold on to that lesson and create a better and more equal education system post-COVID.